The Journey Beyond the Storm. Part 1. When Everything Falls Apart. The rain had been falling for hours. Ethan Carter stood near the window of his small apartment, staring at the city lights outside. Cars moved through the wet streets below. People rushed home beneath umbrellas, and life continued as if nothing had changed. But for Ethan, everything had changed. Just 3 months earlier, he had believed he was living the life he had always dreamed of. He had a stable job at a construction company, enough income to support his mother, and plans to build a future with the woman he loved. Then, one unexpected morning, everything collapsed. The company announced massive layoffs. Employees gathered in silence as managers handed out envelopes. Ethan still remembered the moment his name was called. He opened the letter. His hands trembled. His position had been terminated. 15 years of loyalty had ended with a single piece of paper. At first, he convinced himself it wasn't the end. "I'll find another job," he told his mother. "I'll be okay." Weeks passed. Applications turned into rejections. Interviews led nowhere. Savings slowly disappeared. Bills continued arriving. One evening, he sat at the kitchen table while his mother prepared dinner. "Ethan," she said softly, "don't lose hope." He forced a smile. "I'm trying," but deep inside, fear had begun to grow. He stopped answering calls from friends. He avoided conversations about work. He questioned everything. Had he failed? Had God forgotten him? One Sunday morning, after another sleepless night, Ethan walked into the old church his family had attended since childhood. The wooden pews looked exactly the same. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows. He sat alone near the back. The pastor spoke about storms. "Faith," he said, "isn't believing that storms won't come. Faith is trusting that God walks with you through them." Ethan lowered his head. For the first time in weeks, tears filled his eyes. After the service ended, most people left quickly, but Ethan remained seated. Finally, he whispered a prayer. "Lord, I don't understand what's happening. I thought I was doing everything right. I worked hard. I tried to be honest. Why does it feel like you've gone silent?" There was no thunder, no dramatic sign, only silence. Yet deep within his heart, a gentle thought appeared. "Do not give up. Your story is not over." Ethan lifted his head. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but somehow he found enough strength to stand up. The next morning, instead of staying in bed, he woke up early. He made coffee for his mother. He organized his resume again. He sent more applications. Later that afternoon, while walking through town, he noticed an elderly man struggling to carry groceries. Without hesitation, Ethan offered help. "Thank you," the old man said. "You remind me that kindness still exists." Ethan smiled. "It wasn't much." The old man looked directly into his eyes. "Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness become the biggest miracles." Those words stayed with him. Days turned into weeks. Nothing changed immediately, but Ethan began noticing something different. He no longer measured success only by results. He measured it by faithfulness. Each day he chose gratitude. He thanked God for another sunrise, for his mother's laughter, for strength to keep moving. Then came another blow. A hospital called. His mother's medical tests revealed complications that required expensive treatment. Ethan felt his knees weaken. How could this be happening? He could barely afford groceries. How would he pay medical bills? That night, sitting alone in the hospital parking lot, he cried harder than he ever had before. He didn't understand, but he decided to take one more step. The next day, and the day after that, and somehow, little by little, the journey continued. The Journey Beyond the Storm. Part 1, When Everything Falls Apart, continued. The following morning, Ethan woke before sunrise. For a few moments, he forgot everything. Then reality returned. The unpaid bills, his mother's illness, the uncertainty of tomorrow. He sat quietly on the edge of his bed, staring at the floor. Fear whispered into his thoughts. What if nothing changes? What if you lose everything? What if you're not strong enough? He closed his eyes. His hands trembled as he prayed. "Lord, I don't have much faith left, but I'll give you what I have." After getting dressed, Ethan drove his mother to another hospital appointment. She looked tired but peaceful. As they waited for the doctor, she smiled at him. "You've always carried too much on your shoulders," she said gently. "I just want to take care of you," Ethan replied. She squeezed his hand. "You are not carrying this alone." Those words reminded him of something he had heard in church. Faith wasn't pretending everything was fine. Faith was trusting God, even when everything wasn't fine. After the appointment, they stopped at a small diner. An exhausted waitress accidentally spilled coffee near their table. She immediately apologized. "I'm so sorry," she said nervously. "It's been a difficult week." Ethan simply smiled. "It's okay, don't worry about it." The waitress looked surprised. Most customers would have complained. Before leaving, Ethan noticed tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "You have no idea how much kindness means right now." Driving home, Ethan realized something important. Everyone was fighting battles nobody else could see. The businessman rushing down the street, the single mother buying groceries, the teenager sitting quietly in the corner. Everyone carried hidden pain. That evening, Ethan received another rejection email. His heart sank. He had applied for dozens of jobs. Nothing. He almost threw his phone across the room. Instead, he placed it down carefully. Then he walked outside. The sky above the city was dark, but thousands of stars still shined. He remembered being a child. His father used to point toward the stars and say, "Never judge the future by the darkness around you. Even the night sky carries light." Ethan looked upward. Maybe hope worked the same way. The darkness wasn't the whole story. A few days later, Ethan visited the church food pantry to volunteer. He had almost nothing himself. Still, he wanted to help. An elderly woman named Margaret handed him canned goods to organize. "You look troubled," she observed. Ethan hesitated before answering. "I lost my job. My mother's sick. I don't know what comes next." Margaret nodded. "When I was younger," she said, "my husband died unexpectedly. I thought my life had ended. What happened? I discovered that God's faithfulness often reveals itself one day at a time." She smiled. "He never showed me the entire staircase, only the next step." Those words settled deeply into Ethan's spirit. One step, not the entire future, just the next faithful step. Weeks passed. Ethan continued applying for work. He continued volunteering. He continued caring for his mother. Some days felt easier. Other days felt impossible. One rainy afternoon, while returning from an interview, his car broke down. He stared at the steering wheel in disbelief. Seriously? He laughed bitterly. Then he cried. Sitting alone inside the silent vehicle, he whispered, "How much more can I take?" Minutes later, someone knocked on his window. A mechanic from a nearby repair shop had noticed him stranded. "Need help?" the man asked. Ethan nodded. The mechanic examined the problem. "It should cost more than this," he said later. "But don't worry, we'll figure something out." Ethan blinked. "Why would you help me?" The mechanic shrugged. "Years ago, someone helped me when I couldn't afford anything. I never forgot it." Driving away later that evening, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about it. Kindness moved from person to person, like ripples across water. Someone received compassion, then passed it forward. Maybe miracles weren't always dramatic. Maybe miracles often looked like ordinary people choosing love. The following Sunday, Ethan returned to church. This time, he sat closer to the front. The pastor opened his Bible and said, "Waiting seasons test our faith, but waiting does not mean abandonment." Ethan listened carefully. Some of the greatest blessings arrive after the longest periods of uncertainty. Something inside him awakened. Perhaps this season wasn't punishment. Perhaps preparation was taking place beneath the surface, like seeds growing underground before anyone could see them. After church ended, a man approached him. "You're Ethan, right?" "Yes. I heard you're looking for work." Ethan's heart quickened. "We may have an opening at our community center. It isn't glamorous. The pay isn't extraordinary. But we need someone dependable." Tears filled Ethan's eyes. "I'd be grateful for the opportunity." Walking toward his car afterward, he looked toward heaven. The problems weren't gone. His mother's health challenges remained. Financial pressure still existed. But for the first time in months, hope felt real. Small, fragile, yet real. That night, Ethan sat beside his mother's bed. "I think something good happened today," he said. She smiled. "I told you." "Told me what?" "God writes beautiful stories, even when we're only living through difficult chapters." Ethan looked down. Maybe this chapter wasn't the ending. Maybe it was the turning point. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows. The future remained uncertain. Questions remained unanswered. But one truth had become clear. He wasn't alone. He never had been. And somewhere beyond the storm clouds gathering over his life, a sunrise was already on its way. Ethan didn't know it yet, but the greatest test of his faith was still ahead. Monday morning arrived with a cold wind and gray skies. Ethan stood outside the community center, staring at the old brick building before him. Children laughed somewhere inside. Volunteers moved boxes near the entrance. He took a deep breath. This wasn't the career he had once imagined. Months ago, he had dreamed of promotions, financial security, and a carefully planned future. Now he was simply grateful for an opportunity. As he stepped through the doors, a middle-aged woman approached him. "You must be Ethan," she said warmly. "My name is Rebecca. Welcome to the team." "Thank you," Ethan replied. Rebecca gave him a tour of the center. The building offered after-school programs, food assistance, counseling services, and activities for struggling families. We don't have much, Rebecca explained, but we try to remind people they haven't been forgotten. Those words touched Ethan deeply, because forgotten was exactly how he had felt. His first few weeks passed quickly. He organized donations, delivered food packages, helped children with homework, cleaned storage rooms. The work was exhausting, but strangely, it filled his heart with peace. One afternoon, a little girl named Lily sat quietly in the corner of the classroom. Unlike the other children, she rarely smiled. Ethan walked over. "How are you doing today?" he asked. She shrugged. "My dad left." The words came out softly. "My mom cries a lot." Ethan didn't know what to say. Finally, he sat beside her. "When I was little," he began, "I thought being strong meant never feeling sad." Lily looked at him. "But now I think being strong means continuing to love and hope, even when life hurts." "Do you think things get better?" she whispered. Ethan paused. A few months ago, he wouldn't have known how to answer. Now he smiled gently. "Yes," he said, as Lily returned a small smile. Ethan realized something extraordinary. The encouragement he once desperately needed was now flowing through him to someone else. Perhaps pain had given him compassion. One evening after work, Ethan visited his mother. She looked weaker than before. The treatments were helping, but recovery was slow. "Tell me about your day," she said. He shared stories about the children, the volunteers, Lily. His mother listened carefully. Then she said, "You know, Ethan, sometimes God uses broken people to heal broken hearts." He lowered his eyes. "I still feel broken." "That's okay," she replied. "Light shines through cracks, too." Weeks later, the community center organized a neighborhood event. Families gathered outside. Music played. Children ran through the grass. Volunteers distributed meals. Ethan watched everything unfold. People from different backgrounds laughed together. Strangers helped strangers. For a brief moment, the burdens everyone carried seemed lighter. Suddenly, Rebecca approached him. "Someone wants to meet you." A man in an expensive suit stood nearby. He introduced himself as Jonathan Hayes. "I've heard wonderful things about your work here," Jonathan said. Ethan looked confused. "My work? The children trust you. The volunteers respect you. You show up every day with integrity." Jonathan smiled. "I own several businesses in the city. I'm expanding one of our outreach programs. We need someone who genuinely cares about people." Ethan could hardly believe what he was hearing. "Would you consider meeting with me next week?" His heart raced. Absolutely. That night, Ethan drove home in silence. Months earlier, losing his job had seemed like the end. If that hadn't happened, he never would have volunteered, never would have met Rebecca, never would have met Lily, never would have met Jonathan. Tears filled his eyes. He whispered softly, "Lord, were you guiding me all along?" He didn't receive an audible answer, but deep within, peace settled over him. A few days later, Ethan sat in Jonathan's office, overlooking the city skyline. Jonathan folded his hands. "Tell me something," he said. "Why do you help people?" Ethan thought carefully. "Because I know what hopelessness feels like. I know what it's like to think you've been forgotten. And if I can help someone believe again, then maybe my struggles weren't meaningless." Jonathan smiled. "That's exactly why I want you on this team." Ethan received the position. The salary was more than he expected. The schedule allowed him to continue caring for his mother, and the work aligned with everything he had learned during his darkest season. Driving home afterward, he remembered sitting alone in his apartment months earlier. Terrified, broken, convinced his story had ended. If someone had shown him this future then, he wouldn't have believed it, because miracles rarely arrive the way we expect. Sometimes they begin disguised as disappointment, as delays, as closed doors. That evening, Ethan visited the hill outside town, where he had once cried out in despair. The sunset painted the sky with brilliant shades of gold and crimson. He stood quietly. The wind moved gently around him. He thought about every rejection letter, every sleepless night, every hospital visit, every unanswered question. None of it had been wasted. The journey had changed him. He was stronger, kinder, more compassionate, more faithful. He finally understood. God hadn't abandoned him in the storm. God had been walking beside him through it. Ethan closed his eyes and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I almost gave up on myself." As darkness slowly covered the horizon, a new challenge was already approaching. One phone call, one unexpected revelation, a test that would shake everything he had rebuilt. Ethan's greatest trial. The following week began with hope. For the first time in many months, Ethan felt that life was finally moving in the right direction. He had a meaningful job. His mother's treatment was progressing. The fear that once consumed his thoughts had slowly been replaced by peace. But life has a way of testing us when we least expect it. One evening, while reviewing paperwork in his office, Ethan's phone rang. It was the hospital. His heart immediately tightened. "Mr. Carter," the nurse said gently, "your mother has experienced some complications. We need you to come right away." The world around him suddenly became silent. His hands trembled. He grabbed his keys and rushed toward the hospital. Every red traffic light felt unbearable. Every minute felt like an hour. When he finally arrived, doctors explained that although they were doing everything possible, the next few days would be critical. Ethan sat beside his mother's bed. Machines beeped softly in the background. He looked at the woman who had sacrificed everything to raise him, the woman who had encouraged him when he had lost hope, the woman who had taught him to believe. For a long time, he simply held her hand. Finally, tears filled his eyes. "Mom," he whispered, "I'm scared." She slowly opened her eyes. Even through her weakness, she smiled. "My son, I don't know what will happen," Ethan said. "What if I lose you?" She gently squeezed his hand. "Listen to me carefully." He leaned closer. "Faith isn't trusting God only when life makes sense. It's trusting Him when you don't understand anything at all." Ethan lowered his head and cried. His mother continued speaking. "When your father passed away, I was terrified. I didn't know how I would raise you. I didn't know how we would survive. But somehow God carried us. He'll carry you too." Those words became treasures within Ethan's heart. The following days were difficult. He divided his time between work and the hospital. He barely slept. Fear returned. Questions returned. The same doubts he thought he had overcome whispered again. Why does suffering exist? Why do good people struggle? Why does life hurt so much? One night, exhausted and emotionally drained, Ethan walked outside the hospital. The sky above him was dark. He sat alone on a bench. He looked upward and prayed. "Lord, I trusted you. I believed things were getting better. So why does it feel like another storm is beginning?" Silence surrounded him. Then, slowly, memories flooded his mind. The elderly man who had thanked him for kindness. Margaret's wisdom. Lily's smile. Rebecca's encouragement. Jonathan's opportunity. His mother's faith. Moment after moment. Evidence after evidence. God had never abandoned him. Not once, even during the hardest seasons. Even when Ethan couldn't recognize it. He realized something profound. Faith wasn't the absence of fear. Faith was choosing trust despite fear. The next morning, Ethan returned to his mother's room. She looked peaceful. "We've survived many storms, haven't we?" she asked. He smiled through tears. "We have. And what have we learned?" Ethan took a deep breath. "That storms don't last forever." She nodded. "And?" He squeezed her hand. "That God stays with us through every one of them." Her eyes filled with pride. "Exactly." Days later, the doctors shared encouraging news. Her condition had stabilized. Recovery would take time, but hope had returned. Ethan stepped outside the hospital and closed his eyes. Warm sunlight touched his face. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to breathe. As he stood there, he understood something that would change his life forever. Miracles are not always instant. Sometimes miracles look like strength to endure another day. Sometimes miracles are people who walk beside us during pain. Sometimes miracles arrive quietly, disguised as courage, wisdom, and unexpected kindness. And sometimes, the greatest miracle is discovering that even in your darkest valley, you were never walking alone. Months later, Ethan returned to the hill overlooking the city, the same hill where despair had once consumed him, the same hill where he had first whispered, "I can't do this anymore." Now, as the setting sun painted the sky with gold and crimson, he smiled. He wasn't the same man. The storms had changed him. Not by destroying him, but by shaping him. He had learned that closed doors could lead to better paths, that broken hearts could become compassionate hearts, that waiting seasons could strengthen faith, and that God's silence never meant God's absence. He looked across the horizon and whispered, "If you're listening to this story today and you're tired, don't give up. If your prayers feel unanswered, don't stop believing. If your heart is broken, hold on, because your story isn't finished yet. The chapter you're living through today may be painful, but it is not the final chapter." The sunrise is coming. Tears rolled down Ethan's face, but this time they weren't tears of fear. They were tears of gratitude. He understood now. The journey beyond the storm wasn't about avoiding pain. It was about discovering hope within it. And as the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the mountains, Ethan turned and walked toward home. A new season was beginning. New challenges awaited. New lessons would be learned. And a deeper miracle was about to unfold. Because sometimes, just when you think you've reached the end of your strength, God begins writing the most beautiful chapter of your life. End of part 1. To be continued in Part 2, The Valley of Waiting.